Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and once again, welcome to the Sports Wrap with Michael Kravetz. And on today's show, once again, another jam-packed lineup. Going to get into the Pitt Panther talk, the Pittsburgh Penguins, Pittsburgh Pirates, and my overall impressions of the first weekend of the NCAA Tournament. And we're going to start off today's show with none other than the Pittsburgh Panthers. And they were coming into this tournament a number 8 seed in the West, going up against number 9 seed Wichita State. So you thought coming into this game it was going to be an even match, really a 50-50 on who's going to win. Not too many people, analysts around the country and even people here in Pittsburgh, not too many people thought that Pitt was going to have a tough time with Wichita State. They thought it was going to be, a rugged match. Both teams are mirror images of each other. And it would be fairly close, but they all thought that Pitt was going to come away with the victory. But in this game, it was far from a Pitt victory. Coming out to start in the first half, Pitt just never got their offense going. 6 turnovers in over 7 minutes, first 7 minutes of the game. Just a bad shooting day for the Panthers. They end up losing the game 73-55, an 18-point loss. The largest margin of victory ever in a defeat coached by Jamie Dixon of the Pitt teams in the tournament. And really, both teams shot the ball poorly. And it was just a matter of Pitt being worse than the Shockers of Wichita State. And in this game, Pitt just did nothing right. Woodall, who has been pretty much their go-to scorer this entire season, he had his worst game of the season by far, and it was probably the worst game of his career. 1 of 12 shooting, only 2 points, 5 turnovers, only 1 assist. He just looked out of it. He shot at least 3 or 4 air balls in this game. A couple were from the 2-point line, which was astounding to me. And he just couldn't get into any sort of comfort zone shooting the ball. And the other players on this team, Lamar Patterson, who has been there at times, one of their go-to guys on offense, he struggled as well. He had 9 points, but 7 of them were from the free throw line, 3 turnovers, only 1 of 7 shooting. And with the bench today, they got 20 points out of the bench, but they didn't come, the points from the bench didn't come at appropriate times. It was later on in the game when Pitt started to score the ball more frequently. They got nothing from Trey Ziegler. And once again, he has been absent the last month of the season. I thought he was really going to be a spark for this team, being the leading scorer at Central Michigan and then transferring here, but he just never really lived up to his potential. And overall, just Pitt struggled. 15 turnovers total. Wichita State out-rebounded them 37-32. It was just a poor day. Normally you think Pitt would play better. This wasn't a microcosm of the season. They are a better team than what they displayed against Wichita State. They're not going to go 1 for 17 from the 3-point line. Every game. They had a game where they didn't make a 3-pointer, but just to shoot that poorly. It was 28% from the field goal percentage in the first half. They ended up totaling 35% because obviously they got a good amount of shots later on in the second half, but that was when the game was out of hand. Wichita State, they only had a 5-point lead at halftime. And, Pitt should have felt, okay, we're still in this game. We're only down by 5. So we should feel good about ourselves. But they just couldn't get anything going in the second half. They cut the lead to 7 with about 5 to 6 minutes to go, but they just couldn't come any closer. They didn't have any offensive rhythm going. The first 3-point shot that they hit came with 17-15 to go in the second half with Deron Johnson hitting it. But other than that, it was just not good whatsoever. And to top off the bad days by Woodall and Patterson, they both ended up fouling out of the game. It was just a tough way for Woodall to end his career at Pitt. He ended up, post-game, he was crying. He could barely hold himself together. Dante Taylor to put his arm around his shoulder, and just a tough way to see those seniors go out in a game like this. There was, though, a couple bright spots, surprisingly enough, in this game. Steven Adams, by far, had his best game of the year. Only his second double-double of the season. 13 points, 11 rebounds, 2 blocks. I think that was one of the things this team lacked in this game. They did not go enough inside to Steven Adams. There was a point where Dixon had him on the bench after he got a foul 20 seconds into the game for the next 6 minutes. That's something Dixon should not have done. He didn't have Adams in the game in the second half at crucial moments. He kept him out for some reason. I don't know why. But it seemed like Adams is the only effective offensive player on the team. And, James Robinson, even though he didn't have a strong game, I thought he played extremely well. 7 points, 3 assists for the freshman. It was a nice glimpse for the future for Robinson and Adams, these freshmen who I think will vastly improve by next season. And another strong point of the game, which has been an Achilles heel for this team the entire season, was the free throw shooting. They end up going 16 out of 20. That's 80%. So it just figures that on their worst shooting day this season, they end up going 80% from the free throw line. You think shooting 80%, oh, this Pitt team, that means they won the game. No, just wasn't the case. And Wichita State, like I said, weren't even that much better. They shot 2 of 20 from three-point range, 39% shooting as a team. They were led by Malcolm Armstead, who had 22 points, and Cleanthony Early, 21 points off the bench. And the majority of their points, 33 of the 73 points, came from the free throw line. They attempted 41 free throws. Pitt committed 27 fouls, the most fouls they've committed in a game this year. It was just not a good game by Pitt whatsoever. One of the worst performances of the first weekend of the tournament, because a lot of the analysts, they just said that Wichita State thumped the Panthers. So obviously this was not a good game, a good coaching effort by Jamie Dixon, and a lot of the people around Pittsburgh were pretty much calling for Dixon's head. On the radio show, after the post-game interviews, they were saying, oh, okay, Dixon, he should definitely be gone. He is not cutting it as a coach here. The USC job is opened, and there were inclinations that Jamie Dixon would be taking that job. He's always linked to these opening jobs on the West Coast because his parents are still in California. One sister is there. But yesterday, when Jamie Dixon appeared on the pregame show for the tournament coverage as a guest analyst, as he did a couple years ago, he wanted to clear the air, and he announced that he signed a contract extension to remain at Pitt for the next 10 years, up to 2022, 2023. So that puts the end to any speculation that he's going to leave. Now, obviously, you could leave a few years into the contract. He could go somewhere, but as of right now, he is staying in Pittsburgh. He said that he loves this city. I mean, his 2 children, that they only know this city. They've grown up in Pittsburgh. His wife loves the city. And I'll admit that I was a little frustrated with Dixon's coaching in this game, but not once did I think that he deserved to go, that he should take another job. I think that the Panthers are lucky to have him as their coach because he has the highest winning percentage in the Big East. For a minimum amount of coaching, he's coached in the league for 10 years, and he has the highest winning percentage, ahead of Jim Calhoun, ahead of Jim Boeheim, ahead of John Thompson. That's just amazing. Now, I know people are going to knock on him, saying, okay, you haven't done well in the postseason. You've only been to one Elite Eight. That was the one year you had the best possible team to reach the Final Four. All the other times, multiple losses in the Sweet 16, multiple losses in the round of 32, and now 2 losses now in the round of 64. Granted, yes, Pitt should be judged by how they do in the postseason, which has not been good. But you have to have a good season in order to get to the postseason. And I think a lot of Pitt fans would happily take them to make to the NCAA tournament every year. And even if they were to lose in the first round or the second round, at least they're not going to another CBI or making the NIT. Because you want to get to the NCAA tournament. It's just Dixon now, he's going to have to do something with his philosophy, change something where making his team play better in the postseason rather than to lay it all on in the regular season. Whether that goes in with scheduling tougher opponents in the non-conference portion of your schedule, or trying to recruit new players. So I just think Dixon staying is a good deal. He's 47. He wants to retire in Pittsburgh. By the end of the contract, he'd be 57. And I mean, he signed 4 contract extensions before, but this is the most lucrative because now his salary, it was at $1.8 million. Now it's going to jump up to $2.1 million. And of course, like I said, people are going to say, "Oh, why are you rewarding him for losing all the time?" Well, they have the great regular seasons. Just it has to translate over into the postseason. And so now you look at this team going into next year. This was a great season that they had. Finished with a 24-9 record. Obviously, the Big East tournament was not the way they hoped for, and obviously the results in the NCAA tournament. But they had some nice wins in the regular season, beating Connecticut at home, beating Syracuse at home, getting that nice road win against Cincinnati. There were also some lows. The comeback win for Notre Dame at the Pete when Pitt was up 19-3 at one point. The 2 losses to Marquette. The loss to Michigan, the only tough non-conference team that they played. But all in all, Pitt had a good season. It was a bounce-back year. Got back into the tournament. And let's hopefully they can continue that stretch now once they move to the ACC for next year. So now if you look at this team for next year, obviously Trey Woodall and Dante Taylor, both seniors this year, they will be gone from the team. The 2 new recruits that Dixon has right now coming in, a guard, Josh Newkirk from Raleigh, North Carolina, and they say he's a quick, speedy guard that they envision, if he's ready to start, to play in the backcourt alongside James Robinson. That'd be a nice 1-2 combo like that they had this year with Woodall and Robinson. I'm assuming that Newkirk is more of a shooter than Robinson, so Robinson will primarily control the point. And then the other recruit, forward Mike Young from New Jersey, pretty much a fill-in role, I would assume, kind of like Dante Taylor. Obviously not as big, but just another nice forward to add to the mix. So now Pitt has 2 more spots left, 2 scholarships that they have to offer for the upcoming season. And I think that the 2 players that Dixon can recruit to get here will be key in determining how far this team goes in the future. Right now, the mix of players that they have Lamar Patterson, who will start. James Robinson back. Steven Adams said he will be back. He will not go to the NBA, so he will at least be back for 1 more season. And then you figure if Josh Newkirk can come in and perform well as a freshman, if he can't, I'm assuming they're going to either go to Cameron Wright, possibly J.J. Moore at the shooting guard position, or Deron Johnson, who is the Pitt's best 3-point shooter. And then you have Talib Zana alongside Steven Adams in the front court. 76% of the team's scoring will be back. They're playing in the ACC, which the top teams I think are a little tougher than the Big East, but I think it's a conference that Pitt will still be successful in because they're a team that I think their style of play stands out from the rest. Now, like I said, with the 2 recruits that Dixon can bring in here, I think it needs to be a change of pace. They need to go out and find a shooter because, like this year you saw, they did not have a player who was a go-to guy who could create shots for himself. Robinson is not a driving point guard. Trey Woodall, he kind of was, but he was more of a spot-up shooter. Patterson's the only one that has the capability of a go-to scorer making his own shot, and then J.J. Moore at times. They need to have someone that's more athletic and that is quick, because in that Wichita State game, one of the advantages that the coach of the Shockers, Greg Marshall, said that when they were scouting Pitt, they thought that they had quicker players, and that was the case in the game. And now that I look at it back on the season, Pitt's players were not that quick. I think with the exception of Cameron Wright and Trey Woodall in spurts, those are the 2 quickest players on the court. They need to find someone who has the potential to be an NBA prospect, because that's something that Jamie Dixon has not had. They have not had any guards that were potential NBA picks. Sam Young was a forward, and then you had Blair, Chris Taft, Aaron Gray, and Steven Adams, all big men. They need to find a guard who can carry a team on his back. Now, I'm not saying that, Josh Newkirk, this freshman, is going to carry a team on his back. They have Steven Adams. He will improve. Big guys tend to develop year after year. James Robinson will be a lot better. He just has to gain more muscle and drop down in weight. And then you think that Lamar Patterson should be better. It'll be his last year. Talib Zana, his last year. And then the improvement of Deron Johnson, who I think they're going to add more to his game because this year he was pretty much just a three-point shooter. This team, I think, will definitely make it back to the NCAA tournament. What I'm hoping to see, though, is that the two recruits, they are go-to players, maybe outside of New York, and better non-conferencing scheduling. Because I know it's going to be a new conference, and you're thinking, oh, maybe we should just, schedule the same types of teams that we have before, or that the Panthers have had before in the past. But you got to go out and schedule tough teams. Whether it be lower teams from power conferences, so be it. They still need to do it. So that's what I'm looking for this Pitt team, and I'm sure I'll be keeping a close eye on the next two recruits that Dixon is going to try to bring in here. And with that, we will now get into some Penguins talk. And the Penguins only had 2 games over the past week. Both wins. They have continued their winning streak to 11 games. And they will play Philadelphia tonight. And I know Philadelphia is going to be hungry to end that streak. They have played well at the Consol Energy Center. But the Penguins, I think, are a team on a mission. I could see this streak lasting a while. And it started off on Tuesday with the game against the Capitals. Marc-Andre Fleury was in net. And in this game, it was a low-scoring game. 1-1, heading into the third period. And Matt Niskanen had a nice goal from close to the slot. A great pass by Sidney Crosby. Matt Cook came right out of the penalty box. It was a 3-on-2 rush. Niskanen puts it behind Braden Holtby, and the Penguins win the game 2-1. 24 blocked shots by the Pens, the majority of them by the defensemen. The defense has continued to play well. The penalty kill has also been impressive in both games. Washington went 1 for 5 in the game Tuesday night, and then in the game on Friday that the Penguins won against the Islanders in New York 4-2, the Islanders went 0 for 2. And I think what's impressive is that these penalty killers, Craig Adams, Joe Vitale, Brandon Sutter, Pascal Dupuis, even Sidney Crosby at times, they're starting to play with the chip on their shoulder because the penalty kill is something that the Penguins have prided themselves on. And over the past few years, they were always near the top. And this year, they were the bottom in the league. Just about 2.5 weeks to 3 weeks ago, the Penguins were about 26, 27, and now they're up to 20th with an 80% penalty kill. So special teams is something the team prides itself on, and that it's pretty much if they have a good, successful power play, they want to have a successful penalty kill. Penalty kill is edging up there. Their power play, number 2 in the NHL, converting nearly 24%. So special teams is huge for the Penguins, and they always have an advantage when it comes to that, and they want to continue to have an advantage like that heading into the playoffs. And like I said, in these 2 games, the PK stepped it up, the defense stepped it up. And the amazing thing is that once again, the Penguins are still doing it without Chris Letang and Evgeny Malkin. They're not playing these past 2 games. They will not play tonight against Philadelphia. And the one thing I was looking at was the power play, because Malkin and Letang, they're always on the power play. Jeffrey was inserted for Malkin's spot, and then Simone Dupre was actually at the point where Letang normally is at. And they went 1 for 3 against the Capitals, 0 for 2 against the Islanders, but still, the power play is clicking. And when it can click, when you don't have your top 2 point producers, Letang leading the NHL in points among defensemen, and then Malkin, who is amazing on the power play, it says something about your team and the depth that you have. And once again, Chris Kunitz, in the New York Islander game, added his 19th goal of the year. He is now second in the NHL. It's hard to believe. He is second. 33-year-old Chris Kunitz, second in the NHL in scoring with 41 points. He's only behind Sidney Crosby with 52 points. So I think it's a given that unless Crosby has a huge tailspin and struggles mightily, which I don't see happening, he will win the Art Ross Trophy for most points in a season. I mean, geez, the pace he's on, he could end up with over 75 points in a 48-game season, which is impressive. Kunitz chipping in once again, and Pascal Dupuis, he added an empty net goal with 0.1 second left, well, 1 second left in the New York Islanders game. It was just an impressive showing because the first period they were dreadful against the Islanders. The Islanders outshot them 14-3. Huge saves by Tomas Vokoun kept the team in the game. The Penguins didn't even get their first shot until the 8-minute mark of the first period. And in the second period, they came out, answered the toll. Joe Vitale getting a nice goal midway through the second period. He has stepped up. He had that nice goal against Boston last Sunday, and now chip in here against the Islanders. And it's impressive to see, the guys, the third and fourth line, they step up and they produce. Because that's what you're going to need. That's what a Stanley Cup champion team needs. Because when your top lines aren't working all the time, you're going to need people on your lower lines to, give you a goal here and now and then. And Joe Vitale has been doing that. The Islanders answered right back, but then Kunitz got his. And then in the third period, Sutter had a nice goal early in the third. And just from then on out, the Penguins dominated the third period. They had two major penalty kills. They came in the final 7.5 minutes of regulation. That was big. And just the play of Vokoun. He was not even one of the 3 stars of the game. That's how much the Islanders, whoever got the stars, thought of Vokoun. But he was essential in this game. If he was not there, and it was Fleury in there or something, Vokoun was the reason this team stayed in the game and won it. And, it's 33 of 35 saves. And what I did not know that I found out a few days back was that Vokoun was actually the goalie that gave an inspiring speech after the first period when this streak started, March 7th against the Flyers, when they were down 4-1 in the first period. And it was pretty amazing because you wouldn't expect a backup goalie, and him being a veteran. He's not really a loud-spoken individual, but he gave a speech, it ignited the fire, and they have not lost since. So, in his play, when he was struggling before the streak, he has bounced back very well, shown why the Penguins went out and got him. He is a true veteran, and he is definitely one of the reasons this team is in first place in the Atlantic Division. And I also just want to touch upon the Capitals game real quick. There was a sequence in the third period when the game was tied at 1, and the Capitals had a 4-minute power play. It was a double minor being served by Orpik. And boy, was that crowd at the Consol Energy Center loud as ever. My mistake, it was on Matt Cook. And the crowd there, they were cheering really loud. They were getting behind the Penguins. The Penguins they kept knocking the puck down back in the Capital zone. And once they killed that penalty, the crowd they roared. It was explosive. And then Matt Cook coming right out of the penalty box. And what happens? Niskanen gets the goal. Proves to be the game-winning goal. And that happens when a team gets a huge penalty kill. It boosts the momentum. It gets the crowd going. And that's what kind of catapults the team into getting, a goal coming right back off the kill. So the Penguins have now won 8 straight at the Consol Energy Center. Like I said, they're looking to make it 9 in a row tonight against the Flyers. The Flyers are reeling. Right now they're on the outside looking in at the playoffs. Marc-Andre Fleury will be getting the start, and I think it's going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. But I think the Penguins are going to find a way to win because they're just on a roll right now that I don't see them faltering anytime soon. And one of the players that the Penguins decided to call up before the game Friday against the Islanders was forward Trevor Smith. And Trevor Smith is 28 years old. He was down at Wilkes-Barre this year. He was the leading scorer, or second on the team, with 18 goals, 41 points. He's played in 64 games this year. Played about a little over 20 games in the NHL. in his career with both the Islanders and the Lightning. And he was brought up because Tyler Kennedy came down with an illness prior to the game day skate on Friday. So he was put in. He played an all-right game. I mean, he was on the third line. I mean, he's not going to give you a whole lot. He made some nice plays, but I don't envision him being on the team for that long once Kennedy returns to health and then Malkin and all the other people come back to be in the lineup. But like I said, the Penguins are still doing it without Malkin and without Letang. It's really something special, and they're only 6 away from tying the record that the 92-93 Penguins hold with 17 in a row. They got the Flyers tonight. They got the Canadiens Tuesday. Got the Jets Thursday. And then they have the Islanders again on Saturday. So these are 4 winnable games for the Penguins. And the question is, will the streak reach 15 by the time we do next week's show? That will be something to definitely look forward to. And with the streak, the Penguins are starting to pull away in the Atlantic Division. Right now, they have a 12-point edge over the second-place New Jersey Devils, 24-8 record, the only team in the NHL that does not have an overtime or shootout loss, and they have a 3-point edge over the Canadiens for the first spot in the Eastern Conference. And I think the number 1 spot, it will be a 3-team race between the Penguins, Canadiens, and Bruins. The Bruins are in the Canadiens division, so only one of those teams can be at the top. And then the Penguins, I mean, I don't see the Penguins having a worse seed than the number 2 spot. But if they continue to beat the Canadiens, which they have done already, I think that they're going to get the 1 seed. And it's something that the Penguins haven't really gotten that much over the years they've been in the playoffs. It seems like they're always a 4 or a 5 seed. But I think a 1 seed would be huge for them because they're playing extremely well on home ice. And they just want to pad that lead and maybe clinch the Atlantic Division up, within the next 10 games or so, because with the pace they're going on, that's when it could happen. So with that, I'm going to talk now a little bit about the Pittsburgh Pirates. And it's hard to believe, but thankfully, the season is only 8 days away. Next Monday, April 1st, opening day at PNC Park. Cubs coming in to take on the Pirates. Spring training is finally wrapping up. And I thought it would be fun to go over what the opening day roster possibly will look like. The roster is now down to 37. They are supposed to be down to 25 by today, which will be their official opening day roster. They released Brad Hopp yesterday. It wasn't a surprise. He was a left-handed bat, which is something the Pirates don't really have that much right now in spring, but he batted 139. Half of his at-bats ended up in strikeouts, so it was not surprising at all. Here is what I think will be the outcome for the team's opening day roster. I think with the starting lineup, here's what you have. Marte will be your left fielder. McCutchen will be your center fielder. Right field, right now, I have Travis Snider in there, but a lot of people have said down there covering the team, watching the team, that Snider hasn't been that impressive. And with Presley and Tabata inching up on him, there's a chance that Tabata or Presley could sneak in there at right field. But for right now, I think Snider has the holding spot right now in right field. Then you have Pedro Alvarez at third, Walker at second, Garrett Jones at first, Clint Barmas at short, Russell Martin as your catcher. The bench. Michael McHenry will be your backup catcher. Gabby Sanchez obviously will be splitting time with Garrett Jones at first. They went out and traded for 38-year-old John McDonald from the Arizona Diamondbacks. And McDonald, he's a veteran, played with Arizona and Toronto. He has a .239 career average. I think the reason why they wanted to get him, they needed depth on the bench. They needed someone in there who could come in, late in the game, provide some key hits, and that's what McDonald can do. So he is a guarantee to make this team. So that's 3 of the 5 bench spots locked up. The way I see it, there are 6 players competing for the last 2 spots. Josh Harrison, Brandon Inge, Jose Tabata, Alex Presley, Jordy Mercer, Felix Piet. For right now, I would eliminate Presley and Mercer just because I don't think they have done enough this spring. I think Tabata will make the team as the outfielder. Even though I do like Felix Piet because, the Pirates, they want a left-handed bat off the bench. So you figure that's where Felix P.A. and Presley would come in. As far as the infielder, the backup infielder, they have McDonald at short, but if they needed someone else, Harrison and Inge would be the two likely candidates. Both can play the outfield. And they brought Inge in here. I thought he'd be a lock to make the team. But he's had some injury problems down in Bradenton. So I'm not sure yet. I do not know who the final two bench spots will be. I think Tabata will lock one of them up. But the other one's a mystery to me. I won't be surprised if it was Harrison or Inge. I would be surprised if Felix P.A. made the team. But like I said, it's nice to have left-handed. It's nice to have the option of a left-hander coming off the bench, because I don't think they want to go with 5 right-handed bench players. As far as the starting rotation goes, A.J. Burnett, Wandy Rodriguez, James McDonald, your top 3. Carson's, I'm assuming, would be the 4th. He was scheduled to start his first spring training game today, but he was scratched due to more shoulder soreness. So I don't know what's going on there. I figured he would be the team's 4th pitcher, which leaves 3, but according to Neil Huntington, 4 left competing for the starting pitching, the 5th spot in the rotation. Jonathan Sanchez, Kyle McPherson, Jeff Locke. Sanchez had a couple good outings recently, only allowed 1 run in the 2 outings. He's 1-1 with a 4.73 ERA this spring. 9 walks, that's been an issue. 11 hits and 13 in the 3rd innings. That's not been too bad. Kyle McPherson has been very bad. I thought he was going to be the one that kind of take hold of this 5th spot, because I thought he looked pretty good at the end of last year. 0-2 right now in the spring, 8.31 ERA, not pitching well. I think he'll have another start before the end of spring training. And then Jeff Locke, who had a start yesterday against the Red Sox. In that game, 4 innings pitched, 7 hits, 3 runs. That puts his overall spring totals to 2-1 with a 3.38 ERA, 22 hits, and 21 in the 3rd innings. I see it being Jonathan Sanchez. They signed him to a minor league contract. I wasn't sure what to expect from him, but I remember the years he had in San Francisco. I think that's where Huntington and the Pirates pitching staff think that he can get to again. So I think he will fit that 5th spot. And I think McPherson will be sent down. And, which is surprising, they think Jean-Mar Gomez. Neil Huntington thinks that Jean-Mar Gomez is still in the running for this 5th spot. And he has just had a horrible spring. His ERA is over 15. There's just no way that he makes this team. If he does, I will be shocked. And the way I see the bullpen rounding out, obviously it's going to be a newer bullpen. They lost Reesop. They lost Hanrahan. They lost a lot of pieces there. Jason Grilly is a lock to be the closer. Jared Hughes will be back-end guy, maybe 7th, 8th inning guy. Mark Melancone will probably be your setup guy. Other than that, the other 4 spots, if they do decide to have 7 bullpen pitchers, as opposed to, going with possibly 6 bench players, but the normal was 7 bullpen players. 7 players in the bullpen. I think Tony Watson, because you've got to have a lefty coming in there. Chris LaRue, Justin Wilson, and then the last reliever, I think, would be Jeff Locke. It'd either be Locke or McPherson, and I think you need a guy who can come in to, if a starting pitcher does bad, Locke can go in there and give you like 4 innings possibly in the middle of the game. So, and it's nice because then the Pirates would have 3 lefties in their rotation, or in the bullpen with Watson, Wilson, and Locke. They didn't have a lot of lefties last year in the bullpen. So I think that'll be nice for them if they decide to go with those players. So it'll be very interesting to see how this roster is going to shape out. Hopefully they're going to announce the 25-man roster by Sunday. And we'll see if my predictions, if they hold true. Because I think with that lineup, that is a good, solid lineup. I think that'll get you close to 500, if not over. And it'll just be real interesting to see how this team competes this year, knowing with the 2 collapses last year. But we'll surely be talking more about Pirate baseball next Sunday. It'll be my season preview show, give you all my predictions for the MLB, what I think the Pirates will do, who I think are going to be their best players. It'll be a fun show to do next week. And now I want to give some of my impressions. Actually, no, we'll save that for the last thing. I want to talk now a little bit about the NFL. First, I want to get into some of the signings that happened No news with the Steelers as of yet. But Ed Reed, gone from Baltimore, signed a 3-year deal with the Houston Texans, worth around $15 million. That, I think, will shore up their defense. It doesn't make them a Super Bowl favorite, but I think it definitely makes them the division favorite in the AFC South. And once again, the Ravens now, just as bad as the Steelers. They are getting depleted. They've lost Anquan Boldin on offense, but their defense has just been blitzed. They lost, obviously, Ray Lewis retired. They lose Ed Reed. They lose Donnell Ellerbe. They lose Bernard Pollard. They lose Kerry Williams. They lose Paul Kruger. I mean, they still have Haloti Ngata, but this team has just been decimated. And they still have Terrell Suggs, but it'll be interesting to see how this team bounces back. I think it's safe to say that a lot of people will be projecting Cincinnati as the division favorites because they really haven't lost anyone, and they're still an up-and-coming young team. So wouldn't be too surprised if they're favored to win the AFC North. And a couple of rules were upheld at the owners' meeting on March 20th, which was this past Wednesday. The NFL has decided to ban the tuck rule, which was made infamous in the New England Patriot-Oakland Raider playoff game. Obviously, the rule, it allowed a fumbled ball moving forward in the hand of a quarterback to be called an incomplete pass. That will not be the case anymore. All owners also voted to amend what they called the challenge flag rule, the rule regarding the illegal throwing of a challenge flag. The Jim Schwartz rule is what they're now calling it. It will free the challenging of plays, teams will be charged a timeout with the illegal challenging of a play. If a play is challenged illegally, the team will lose a timeout, even if the challenge is successful. And if a team is out of timeouts, it will be a penalty of about 15 yards, but the play will still be reviewed. I'm okay with that rule. The one rule that I am not okay with is the NFL owners approving the crown of the helmet rule. The new rule pretty much says that a 15-yard penalty will be instituted to a runner or a tackler if they initiate forcible contact by delivering a blow with the top/crown part of the helmet against an opponent when both players are clearly outside of the tackle box. And the tackle box is the area extending from tackle to tackle, usually about 3 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, to the offensive team's end line. I think that is a bad rule. They said incidental contact would not be deemed a foul. But the way I see it, the running backs are going to be more prone now to neck or head injuries if they can't bring their head down. I don't think they're liberally intending to use the crown of the helmet to give them space or leverage to move forward. That's just a normal move. So I think it's a bad rule. A lot of running backs don't like it. Marshall Faulk came out and said he didn't like it. I think it's a bad rule. I know that they're trying to, make this game as safe as possible, but when you start to take the physicalness out of football, it no longer becomes football. So I just think it's a bad rule, and they really got to start, saying, okay, we can't go too far with these rules. But I'm just surprised that they ended up passing it. And now finally, for the last segment of the show, I'm going to give some of my impressions of the latest edition, the 2013 NCAA Tournament. First weekend almost wrapping up. The Sunday games are currently in progress. What I saw in this tournament, especially for my bracket, a lot of the upset picks that I had didn't happen. A lot of the sexy upset picks that a lot of people were saying, Bucknell over Butler, Davidson over Marquette, Belmont over Arizona, it didn't happen. There were upsets that, once again, no one thought was coming. They end up happening. Florida Gulf Coast, who, when I saw them that they were paired up against Georgetown, I knew it wasn't going to be as much of a blowout as people thought, because Florida Gulf Coast, they beat Miami, first game of the year, and what happens? They beat Georgetown by 10. Georgetown never really had a chance in this game. But the one that I was shocked was New Mexico, one of the hottest teams coming into the tournament. A lot of people had them possibly making the Final Four. Stephen Bardo, an analyst on ESPN, had them going to the championship game. They end up losing to Harvard. Harvard won their first NCAA tournament game ever. A 14 seed over 3. 68-62. Shocking. I think the West region so far has been the most shocking region in a tournament that I've seen in a long time. Because with the Pitt loss, which I didn't expect, Gonzaga getting a tough battle from Southern. They only beat Southern by 6. Ole Miss beating Wisconsin in a Wisconsin type of game, a rugged, low-scoring game. LaSalle could possibly be the next VCU. They won their opening game against Boise State, beat Kansas State by 2. Arizona now making it into the Sweet 16, which I didn't think was going to happen. And Gonzaga last night losing to Wichita State by 7 points, 67-60. And now a 9 seed is in the Sweet 16 and will face the winner of the 12-13 matchup between Ole Miss and LaSalle. So one of those 3 teams is guaranteed a spot in the Elite 8, which is, I can't believe it. And if Ohio State can't hold on to beat Iowa State, the 10 seed, then you're going to have a 10 versus a 6. Then the winner of that playing a 9, 12, or 13. So you're a 6 seed or higher. A 6 seed or a lower seed will end up in the Final Four. Amazing. And it just shows that's poor seeding done by the committee, because you had the lowest 4 seeds of the top 4 in the same bracket, and look what happens. You get all these upsets. And I watched the Gonzaga game. I'm a Gonzaga fan. I've always liked them since my younger days, just because I love them being a Cinderella team. The Wichita State game, it was a great game. Wichita State had a 13-point lead in the first half. Then, Gonzaga comes back. They're only down by 5 at halftime. They end up getting a 7-point lead in the second half. And then Wichita State just shoots the lights off the ball. Ron Baker, a player who averages 8 points a game, knocks down back-to-back threes and then makes 2 free throws, ends up with 16 points in the game. They just shut the lights off the ball from beyond the 3-point range. And like I said in that Pitt game, they were 2 of 20 from 3. In the game against Gonzaga, 14-28. So, kudos to Wichita State. They wanted this game. They hung around with Gonzaga. Gonzaga just didn't make enough plays to put them away, and that's what bit them in the butt. So it was an impressive season by Gonzaga, but this was the best team I think they've had. I agree with Mark Few when he said this was the best team they've had in Gonzaga since he was there. And I thought this was the year they could have went to the Final Four. It just didn't happen. And on the other side, probably the game of the tournament so far has been the Butler-Marquette game. Marquette didn't even deserve to beat Davidson. Davidson gave that game away. Marquette won by 1 off a last-second layup by Vander Blue with 1 second remaining. And they end up beating Butler by 2. Butler had a last-second 3, but their big man, Andrew Smith, couldn't get his feet set. Straight away, top of the key, right behind the 3-point line. If he would have been set, he would have had a decent shot, but he just threw it up. It banked off the backboard. Didn't come close. So Marquette, survive in advance. That holds true to them. 2 games that they easily could have lost. They are now in the Sweet 16. The Big East has 3 teams now that made it to the Sweet 16. Louisville, Syracuse, and Marquette. Overall disappointing, I think, for the Big East, though. Villanova losing to North Carolina. Georgetown losing to Florida Gulf Coast. Pitt getting ousted by Wichita State. Notre Dame losing to Iowa State. Cincinnati losing to Creighton. The Atlantic 10, though, they were surprised, going 6-0 after the round of 64. But the games from yesterday, VCU losing to Michigan, getting beaten badly. St. Louis losing by double digits to Oregon. So now you only have... Oh, and Butler losing to Marquette. So now you only have Temple, which goes against Indiana, and then LaSalle going against Ole Miss. So it'll be interesting to see if those 2 A-10 teams can make it far, because they were an underrated conference. They definitely proved it in the NCAA tournament that they're a really solid conference. And I think one of the big... I don't think it's a surprise. Oregon, definitely proving to the committee that we shouldn't have been a 12 seed. They beat Oklahoma State, pretty much had that game in hand, bullied St. Louis, and St. Louis was one of the hot picks out of the Midwest region. They thought if they went up against Louisville, it would be a bad matchup for Louisville, and a lot of people had St. Louis going to the Elite Eight. But Oregon beat St. Louis, and now they're going to get Louisville. So I expect that to be a fun game because both teams play at a fast pace. And the way I see it with my bracket, I can never have a perfect bracket for even one round. Thankfully at this point, I still have all my Final Four teams: Duke, Kansas, Ohio State, and Miami. But I mean, especially in my West region, it's pretty much tortured. The only ones that I had Gonzaga, Arizona, Iowa State, and Ohio State winning the games, but Gonzaga I had going to the Elite Eight, Wisconsin to the Sweet 16, New Mexico to the Sweet 16. That region is just a mess for me. I will say, though, that my Midwest is the best region. I've only had 2 picks wrong, but like I said, I had St. Louis going to the Elite Eight, and that can't happen. So, overall, not a good tournament for me. It seems like my predictions never are. And the funny thing is, I mean, with March Madness coming, you have all these people who don't even follow college basketball, and they end up filling out these brackets. They don't know anything. Case in point, I'd say, hey, Mom, why don't you fill out a bracket? I know you don't know nothing. She's like saying, oh, I don't want to, but I read off the matchups. She tells me the team who she thinks is going to win. She ends up picking Ole Miss to beat Wisconsin, which not a lot of people had. She picks Cal to beat UNLV, which I know was a toss-up. She got that right. She picked Southern to beat Gonzaga, which, I laughed at. And, look, they almost came close to beating them. And the one thing that I really laughed at, I was like, there's no way. She picked Harvard to beat New Mexico. And she got it right. Only 1,200 people in the tournament challenge on ESPN picked Harvard, and she was one of them. Now, she had Harvard going to the Sweet 16, but Arizona pretty much handled them. And I laughed at my dad, because he had Arizona going to the Final Four. And I said, there's no way. Well, the way it's looking, they have a good chance. Because if they don't play Ohio State, or even if they do, they have a great chance still beating them. And then they're probably the second best team right now left in that West region, aside from Ohio State. So they still have a good chance at making that. So I'll just be shocked if it happens. So this tournament, definitely not a lot of close games at the end, as there have been in the past, but just some surprising results. I think there's going to be a lot more closer games coming in the Sweet 16, Elite 8 matchups, and I think there's going to be a lot more higher scoring games. This first weekend, a lot of low scoring games, a lot of the games in the 50s, 60s, not too many in the 80s or 90s. And I think that's just the way college basketball is right now. Scoring is down. Defenses they're a lot better. And I think in the Sweet 16, though, teams are going to have, a week to prepare for their opponents. I expect the games to be a lot more fast-paced. And for some reason, I imagine the scoring going up. That's just my own opinion. I've seen a lot of college basketball this year. I know it's a lot of low-scoring games, but I just have a strong feeling that these games are going to be, upper 70s, lower 80s. So, with that... Oh, and actually, one of the intriguing matchups that I'm most looking forward to, if it possibly happens in the Sweet 16, is going to be Duke, if they hold on to beat Creighton, and Michigan State. Tom Izzo, Coach K, I think the winner of this game will go to the Final Four. Both teams have been there. 2 veteran teams, Ryan Kelly, Seth Curry, Mason Plumlee with Duke, Derek Nix, Keith Appling, Adrian Payne with Michigan State. I think that has the potential to be one of the best games of this NCAA tournament. But with that, that'll do it for today's episode. Next week, like I said, we'll be talking more about the NCAA tournament. We will be close to having the Final Four set, depending on what time I do the show. Be my season preview show of the MLB, all my picks and predictions. We'll see if the Penguins' winning streak continues. And talk more about some Steeler talk. Going to be getting closer to the draft. And also closer to the trade deadline in the NHL. So definitely have a lot of things to comment about that. So it should be another fun-filled, packed show, the Sports Wrap. So signing off, I'm Michael Kravetz, and you just listened to the Sports Wrap.